I have the same set of questions, but I'm gonna ask them exclusively to you, Father Jonathan. So not to put you
I'm
on the
done.
spot.
Boom.
I wanna ask these questions to you about, essentially, rather than what it's like been becoming Orthodox, what it's like been becoming a priest and how that has affected your life. So, how has the priesthood changed your life, Father Jonathan?
Well, um, some of the most glorious highs I've ever known in life, and some of the most horrible lows I've ever known in life have come from being a priest. And they come because you're not just living your own life. You're not just going down the road that you choose and you plan and you prepare. When I got out of seminary, when I was in seminary, I used to brag about, oh, I'll never live in New York. I'll never be in the diocese of New York and New Jersey. I'll never say never, because I ended up doing everything I said I wasn't going to do. So you're kind of, picked by God, sent by God, placed by God someplace where you got to bloom where you're planted. And it may not be where you want to be. I'm not saying I don't want to be on Long Island. I love being on Long Island. But it's not what I foresaw. It's not what I thought was going to happen. And that's fine, by the way. But you really have to prepare as a priest to live a life where God directs you, where God sends you, where God wants you to be. It's like he says to you, I need you over here. And sometimes you don't know how long that's going to last. And it could be all your life. You'll be here all your life. Then you'll be here a couple of years, then you'll be here, then you'll be here, then you'll be here, which is the life other priests lead. So that's one aspect of it, is that you really don't have a lot of control over that, because you certainly don't have any control once you get to a parish over how the people are or the conditions that you find yourself in. When I agreed to be ordained a priest, because I really wasn't seeking it, my bishop kind of talked me into it, strong-armed me into it. I was going to be sent to a mission that was 30 miles, half an hour east from where I was living and from where the church I was attending and serving as a deacon was. Um, and when I got there, what I found was, the previous Sunday, they had about 5 people in attendance. They had only about 20 on their rolls, and most of them didn't come to church. I didn't find out till weeks into being there that they actually had teenagers. The teenagers just didn't want to come. They had no church school. They had no altar servers. They had 3 people that sang in what they called a choir. $17,500 in the bank. Well, I mean, God bless them. They did the best they could, but it was nothing spectacular. There was no one to lead them. And $17,500 in the bank in a takedown setup situation in a Presbyterian church. So when I got there, I said to them, I formulated 6 goals. And I said, if we don't accomplish these 6 goals within the next 3 years, we might as well just shut everything down, because this is too hard to keep going, on any kind of permanent basis. Thank God in those 3 years, we accomplished those 6 goals. We found property, we raised money, we grew certain ministries within the church. We did a lot of things that got us out of what I call phase 1, which was survival mode for those first 3 years. Then we spent maybe the next 10 years stabilizing the church. And then we've spent the time since then, I would say, growing the church. So there's never been any year that has been easy. There's never been any year when finances were real good and attendance was real good and this was real good and that was real good, until the last 2 or 3 years. I wouldn't trade the last 2 or 3 years, when we've had an influx of over 24 people. I wouldn't trade the joy of seeing the church grow and blossom and bloom over the last 3 years over any of the previous, however long I've been there, 27 years. So living the life of a priest is living a life of what would be the opposite of expectations? Unexpectations. A life that you really can't control much, but really, really, really have to remind yourself again and again and again that you're dependent on God. It's not you, it's God. It's God working through you. It's God I would sometimes not, because I had to always have a secular job until just a couple of years ago when I retired from the secular job. I would sometimes have not. I would be doing so many other things, if not for the family, if for church administration and busyness stuff at the church. I would forget to do the sermon, and I'm driving to church on Sunday morning, and I'm praying, Lord, I don't know what exactly I'm going to say. I know the passage, I read it, but I don't know exactly what I'm going to say. Please, Lord, give me the words they need to hear. Give me the words they need to hear. And literally, when the gospel was being finished, I would be saying that, and I would stand in front of them and begin with, in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, glory to Jesus Christ, and I would just start preaching, and whatever came out was what he what he needed me to say. And I know that because I've heard people say, I'm not, I hate talking about myself when I do this, but I've heard people say over the years, Father, that was a really good sermon. I really needed to hear that. Those words really spoke to me today. Well, where did they come from? Because I didn't practice them. I asked God to give them to me because the week went by and I didn't have time to prepare one. Um, so we have clergy that they have jobs outside the church. They may live far away. They may have small congregations where there's no what I would call critical mass of people to get everything done that he would like to do. So you find yourself concentrating on doing things that you need to do that are fundamental to the survival and well-being of the parish. But you can't do everything you want until you have that critical mass. And then when things start to grow, when you start getting more people, we have more people now attending the church than we've ever had since at least the 90s. And I think we've exceeded those numbers recently. So we have attendance more often than not that's higher than we've ever had, more money, stewardship coming in than we've ever had. So now we're able to do more. Now we're able to start doing more. Now we're able to tell people, start dreaming. We haven't been able to dream for a long time. Now start dreaming, because now we can start doing things we've only dreamed about in the past. Let's dream some more and make them happen now. So those are some thoughts about things that are hard.
I'm thinking about an Orthodox school one day.
Oh, that's on my list. Yeah, most definitely.
Love it.
So you've been at the same parish the whole time?
Been the same parish for 32 years. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
I'm a rarity, actually, in that sense. Not every priest is like that. There's a lot of there's a lot of advantages to it, especially with the church that I'm in now. I could not imagine leaving them in the first 10 to 15 years that they needed, because the church was founded in 1983. I got there in May of 1993. So it was formed in 83. I got there in 93. I was the fifth priest in less than 10 years. So that was one of the reasons why they had so many problems forming into a community, because they kept changing leadership every year or 2 years. And that's the kiss of death when you're trying to plant something from the start. You need someone to really stay there about the first 7 years. And once it's planted, and once it's, it starts to bloom and blossom, and things are in place, then maybe he can leave and another guy can come in. But that's not what happened where I went. And I knew that intrinsically, and that I had to make a commitment to stay there in order to make it work. And I'm so glad I did, because the vast majority of the parish now are converts. And I don't know where they would have gone if we didn't exist. I'm sure God would have taken care of them, but they've come to us, and we have a parish now that is attracting more and more and more and more converts, which is really kind of cool. And when I got there, that's what I thought the church would eventually be. It was a church full of mostly cradle Orthodox, but I envisioned at one point in time that it would become a church of mostly converts, and that's kind of what's happening.
So they had to deal with your dad jokes for 32 years?
What's that?
They had to deal with your dad jokes for 32 years?
Oh, no, only since Facebook.
So, just out of curiosity, do you just sweet talk your bishop into letting you stay, or how does that work?
Well, in our jurisdiction, in the Orthodox Church in America, there's more of a tradition of leaving a priest there unless he asks to move. I think we have more of that than you see in the Antiochians or Greeks. And I may be generalizing, and I certainly may be wrong, but I I do see more of a willingness in those two jurisdictions to move priests around than I do in ours. And I could be wrong. That's just based on anecdotal evidence that I observe. I don't think either way is bad, but I think there are certain communities where the priest needs to stay there until the possibility exists for him to leave in a healthy way, in a way that's good and positive for the parish, and doesn't represent such a disruption of emotional pain and all kinds of other things because the beloved priest is leaving. I'm not saying me. I'm just saying in those parishes where that happens, that I think that there has to be a healthy break. I think it is true that a priest could stay someplace too long. But I think again, looking at my particular church, and my work is not done there. I want to get certain things done before I do retire. So they're stuck with me for a little bit while longer, and they know that.
That's awesome. So, what was something that you maybe, I know you kind of mentioned that your bishop, I think you said it was your bishop that kind of coerced you into becoming a priest?
Um, what he said to
Encouraged.
me, the church I'm at now, when I was a deacon back in 1982, 83, whatever it was, 92, 91, 92, said to me, we have this mission out in what was then called Yaphank, a small village in Long Island. And he said, it's dying. And he said, I'm going to close it if I can't find someone to go there. And he's looking right at me, and I kind of sunk back in my chair and I said, well, Vladika, I sure hope you find someone to send there. and and he asked me point blank if I had thought about becoming a priest. And I said, after thinking about it for about a millisecond, no. But we talked and had several conversations, and he had me talk with some senior priests in the in the diocese to kind of butter me up or whatever. But and I looked out there and I said it would be sad to close it, because the way we live on an island, and people who live in Queens and Brooklyn move to Nassau County. Nassau County moves out to Suffolk County. Western Suffolk County moves out to where the mission is. It's just the demographics are just flowing eastward. And I I knew it would be that the church was situated in a place where, if you look on a map of Long Island, there are 4 Greek churches on the North Shore and on the South Shore, forming a rectangle, the 4 corners of a rectangle. And if you draw a line straight through it, that center dot is where the mission was. So we were the only English language church, still are, outside of our sister parish and our mother parish in Dix Hills. We therefore serve a purpose. We have a purpose for existence. And the parish was founded for the purpose of being an English language mission. So that's what we're trying to live up to. And I think that's why people come to us, is that we are the only English language church in Eastern Suffolk County.
I guess so. What was your kind of expectations versus what it actually was like being a priest going in? What was your expectations?
Well, I had served liturgically for a year and a half as a deacon, so I sort of kind of had that and under my wing. And I love serving liturgically, so I don't think there was anything there. I think the expectations were more of, can this church live? This church I was being sent to, can it live? Can it be finally planted, get out of the Presbyterian church and plant us someplace and grow from there? Because we certainly weren't going to grow in a set-up, takedown situation in a Presbyterian church. They did not want us there any longer, especially when it got to the point where we started getting more attendees than they had. I think at that point problems started, because some of their people would. What's that?
I said it was getting spicy. They're like, you have more numbers than us.
Some of their parishioners started coming to our service.
Wow, that's interesting.
Oh, this is really nice. And well, you're welcome, but you got to deal with your pastor first. But we, so I knew we had to get out of it. So I wrote something in before I agreed to be ordained. I ended up writing what I called a vision statement that I gave to my bishop, and I said, Vladika, if you approve this, this is my plan for what I'm going to do when I get there. It was like, I don't know, 11 or 12 pages long. And it dealt with everything. How the parish council was going to be organized, how I would do church school and youth ministry, and I don't know, whatever else. It was really a plan for how I was going to govern the church. And he blessed it. And he said, yes, I bless this. You can do this. Now, can I ordain you? And once we kind of had an agreement in place, because I said, I can't do this without your backing. I can't do this without your blessing and your backing, Oh, you will have it. So, okay. Then, and now that I had it, I said to my wife, you ready? She said, no. And I went ahead and got ordained. So, and so when I got out there, I shared that vision with the parish council and with others. And I said, this is what we're going to do. And they were so desperate at the time to make it work that they agreed to anything and everything I said. So I had it easier than some people did, than some priests did going into their situations. I mean, at first they were not incorporated. They had no bylaws. I wrote the bylaws. The bylaws still exist that I wrote, and I'm the only one that can change them according to the bylaws. The priest is the only one that can change the bylaws.
Some Pope stuff.
No, so I did stuff that I had to do because I had to get this train back on tracks and moving, and that took a little bit of a strong personality. Not something I'm known for, of course, but and over the years we lost people who just didn't like my style or whatever. We had people who came and said, "Oh, I'm going to leave." Why? Well, the Slavic people who said, "Oh, this church is too Greek," and then I had a lot of Greek people who were coming who left after a while and said, "Oh, this church is too Russian." And I'm trying to think, what does each side see that I don't see? But that's fine because you don't want people sticking around who can't work with you. And these people that left couldn't work with me, and that was fine. And I always found that for every person God took away from us, God gave us two in return. God would take one and two would appear. I like to tell this story, so forgive me for taking a moment here. From January of 2004 to the summer of 2005, so in that year and a half period, 18-month period, we lost 30 people. Now, we lost them all to moves. These were all families, for the most part, with 2.3 kids and all that kind of thing, and they up and moved away. Moved out of the state, moved off of the island. And I was, we had about 90 active people by then. And that was a third of our membership. That was a huge, huge hit in 18 months. Come 2006, so a year and a half, we lost 30 people in a year and a half period. And I literally was on my knees praying, Lord, what do I do now? Come January of 2006, within 6 months, he brought us 30 new people.
Wow.
So I've learned that God will provide, but I've also learned something else. That God will not bring you people to your church if you're not ready to receive them. Well, let me repeat that. God will not bring people to your church if you are not ready to receive them. That meant we had to do things that a lot of people in the church didn't know about or like or understand. Why do we have to have greeters, Father? People just walk in, they grab candles, they light candles. They don't need anybody saying hello. Yes, they do. Why do we have to do this, Father? Why do we have to do that? Why do we have to? Because we want to grow. We want to welcome and we want to grow. And that even includes having facilities that are as best as you can present to the public, and doing the best you can in liturgy, doing the best you can with preaching, with singing, with whatever. If you're not ready to receive people and they're going to come and not experience the audio-visual extravaganza that your church, Hagia Sophia and a telephone booth is, you've got to be ready to receive people and to offer them God's best as you can present it, and not take for granted that things will just somehow work themselves out. So we've tried to be very attentive to that especially over the last 10, 15 years. And I think it's beginning to really pay off for us.
You saying that, Father, reminds me of a conversation Bailey and I had, or just this idea of how churches posts, their services online. And, I guess to each his own, right? But it's just a little bit different when you put a little effort into what you're doing. So, like, you have other people that will post their sermons. Like, I think of like Father Barnabas Powell or Father Moses McPherson sermons, where it's like there's a little bit more intentionality and effort. And this is like no shade to anyone that just kind of just throws their whole service online. But like, just that intentionality sometimes is important with what you're doing. Like, you can't just wake up and just say, all right, like, we just gonna, I'm not gonna prepare this for this sermon. I'm not gonna, there's moments, right? But I'm just saying, like, intentionality is always, important.
And it's intentionality with having the choir practice. It's intentionality with practicing with the altar service. It's intentionality with having, taking even little things like making sure when liturgy starts, there's not little candle butts in the candle stands from the last service. It's intentionality in how you prepare the bulletin and how clean the church is, and things like that. It's really being intentional about everything. And trying to think of not overlooking anything. Because when someone comes in who's never been to your church before, you don't know what they're looking at. And I even have pointed out to people, the guys don't get it, although the women do. You have to have clean bathrooms, for example. And when a woman goes to use the bathroom in the church, she's going to be drawing opinions about what pride you take in the facilities by how clean the bathroom is. For example, men, again, this is something men don't really appreciate, but women do. So you really have to think about how you're coming across to anybody who walks in, how you're coming across the kids. Kids are the best, by the way. That's why I love the Orthodox liturgy, because I call it an audiovisual extravaganza, because it's full of sound and color and light and, with candles and incense. So they smell, they hear, they see. It's really amazing how kids can take it all in. And what do most parishes do? Like mine, no matter how many times I scream about this, they put all the kids in the back. And who's in front of the kids? Adults. Do they ever use the chairs that they're there? No, they stand up the whole service. So the kids are behind walls of people, and they can hear a little bit, and they can see a little bit, maybe smell a little bit. I don't know, but their senses are very limited being in the back.
Right. Put them in the front.
Which is why I hope no one from St. John's is watching right now, which is why I'm taking the chairs out in the future. So we don't have this nonsense anymore.
Preach, Pastor, preach.
Okay, so what was, forgive me if I'm reiterating kind of like the same thing. What did you expect going in?
I had no expectations.
No expectations.
I kind of liken how I went into it like a man being in a kayak or a canoe or something going down the rapids and not quite knowing where the next waterfall is, and just avoiding the rocks and doing the best to keep the ship afloat and keep picking up survivors in the river along the way and filling them in the canoe. That's kind of what I expected it to be, and I have not been disappointed. But like I said earlier, unexpectedly, some of the highest highs and lowest lows I've ever experienced in life were in parish life as a priest.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's probably, I mean, I'm not a priest, so I wouldn't know, but I feel like that's probably the best way to go into the priesthood is not having expectations and just whatever is, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, no, I know what you mean, because we set our own expectations, and God's up in heaven going, you think so, don't you? Yeah, okay. So we have to really rely on him, because we are as clergy, we are his agents. We are. I know clergy say this as a manner of speaking. They talk about my flock, my church. It's not your flock; it's the flock entrusted to your care. It's not your church; you're a steward of it. So are all the people that go there. A lot of my people understand this, that we're stewards of that which has been entrusted to us. And for the clergy, it's not just the church building and all that, it's all the people in it. According to Hebrews, we have to give account for everybody's soul in that church on the day of judgment. That scares the hell out of me.